The sun had barely risen when Jack Miller was already up. His tired eyes scanned the expanse of Hope Ranch, the property his family had tended for generations in the hills of Tennessee. Fall had arrived with force, bringing chilly mornings and a mist that seemed to embrace the green hills around them. Another day, he muttered to himself, adjusting the straw hat over his graying hair. The routine was always the same. Jack would rise before the sun, prepare a strong, bitter coffee, and check on the animals. There was something comforting in the predictability of the days, but also something suffocating. The wrinkles on his face told stories of hard work and difficult choices. "Dad?" Mary Grace's voice echoed through the rustic kitchen. "Heading out already?" He merely nodded without looking at his daughter. Mary was holding little Luke, still sleepy, in her arms. The 10-month-old baby was the only one capable of drawing a gentle smile from his austere grandfather's face, though Jack rarely showed it. "Going to check on the cattle. Looks like rain's coming," he finally replied, taking the last sip of his coffee. "Joseph called last night," said Mary hesitantly. He asked about Smoke. At the mention of the buffalo's name, Jack frowned. Joseph was a rancher from the region who had always shown interest in the animal since seeing it at the last auction. "Not for sale," he answered dryly. "He offered good money, Dad. Said he could help with the barn repairs before the heavy rains." Jack paused at the door, his boots already covered in dirt. For a moment he seemed to consider the proposal. The barn really did need repairs and the money would be welcome, but something within him resisted. "I already said no. The buffalo stays." Mary sighed, rocking Luke, who was beginning to fuss. "I never understood why you keep that animal. He's no good for breeding, barely lets anyone approach him." "Not everything needs to have an immediate use, Mary," he replied, surprising his daughter with the unexpected depth. "Sometimes we just need to wait." With those words, he left for work. The cold morning air burned in his lungs as he walked. Across the muddy ground toward the corral, Hope Ranch had seen better days. After Mary left to marry Anthony in town, Jack had let many things deteriorate, including his relationship with his daughter. Now that she had returned, with his grandson, in her arms and without her husband, things remained tense. Unspoken words hung between them like the mist over the fields. Approaching the corral, his eyes instinctively searched for the imposing figure of Smoke. The black buffalo was in his usual spot, isolated from the other animals, watching the horizon, as if waiting for something or someone. "Good morning, partner," said Jack, maintaining a respectful distance. The animal turned its head slightly, its dark eyes meeting the man's for a moment. There was something in that gaze that had always intrigued Jack, something that seemed almost human. The other ranch hands avoided Smoke. They said he had an evil eye, that he brought bad luck. But Jack never believed in these superstitions. The buffalo was different, yes, but not in a malevolent way. It was as if he carried a secret, something Jack still couldn't decipher. "Boss is talking to that beast again," commented Tim, the oldest ranch hand, to Jimmy, a newly hired young worker. "They say that Buffalo is cursed," replied Jimmy, making the sign of the cross. "In town they say he's a man who was transformed because of a curse." Tim laughed, slapping the young man on the back. "Don't be foolish, boy. Those are stories to scare children. Smoke is just a stubborn animal, like the boss." But while the men talked, Jack remained silent before the buffalo. Somehow he felt there was a purpose for Smoke being there, even if he didn't yet know what it was. "Joseph offered money for you again today," he said quietly to the animal. "But don't worry, you're not going anywhere." Smoke moved his ears, as if understanding every word, his deep eyes fixed beyond Jack's figure, toward the house where Mary Grace had just come out with Luke in her arms. What none of them knew was that this day would change everything, not just the buffalo's fate, but that of the entire Hope family. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. Lunch at Hope Ranch was always silent. Mary Grace served the food while Jack watched his grandson playing on the living room rug. Luke was already trying to crawl, his tiny hands grabbing everything he found along the way. "He's growing fast," commented Jack, breaking the silence. Mary nodded, placing a plate of hearty stew on the rustic wooden table. Takes after his father. Anthony was strong as a child too. The mention of Mary's ex-husband created immediate tension. Anthony had abandoned Mary when he discovered her pregnancy, leaving her with no options but to return to her father's ranch. "Heard anything from him?" asked Jack, trying to sound casual. "No, and I don't expect to," Mary replied firmly. "He made his choice." Jack wanted to say something comforting, but words never came easily to him. His relationship with his daughter had been marked by silences and unmet expectations. When young, he had dreamed that Mary would take over the ranch with the same passion he had inherited from his father, but she always wanted more than those lands could offer. "Mrs. Connie came to visit me yesterday," Mary commented, changing the subject. "She brought herbs for Luke, said they help with growth." Jack made a face. Connie, the region's healer, had always bothered him with her beliefs and rituals. That woman and her superstitions. "Dad, don't start. She just wants to help. And it was she who took care of me when Mom—" Mary stopped, leaving the sentence incomplete. The absence of April, who had passed away 15 years ago, was still an open wound between them. "You know what I think about these things," grumbled Jack, rising from the table. "I'm going back to work." "Connie told me something interesting," continued Mary, ignoring her father's irritation, "about smoke." Jack stopped at the door, his attention captured. "She said black buffaloes like him are rare around here. That in the old tradition they are considered protectors, guardians of something important." "And since when does Connie understand buffaloes?" retorted Jack, though there was curiosity in his voice. "She said her father worked with a buffalo breeder up north. Told stories about how these animals could sense things that humans couldn't perceive, like imminent dangers or important changes." Jack shook his head, but something in Mary's words disturbed him. He remembered Smoke's strange behavior, always observing, always vigilant. "They're just stories, Mary. The buffalo is just a buffalo. Have you ever wondered why you've never been able to get rid of him? Why, among all animals, you keep one that brings no practical benefit to the ranch?" The question hit Jack like a punch. It was true. Several times he had thought about selling Smoke or sending him to slaughter, but had always hesitated at the last moment, not understanding why. "Not everything is about utility," he repeated his phrase from the morning, quickly leaving before Mary could see the confusion in his eyes. As he walked back to the field, memories of the day he had acquired Smoke returned forcefully. The auction in Green Hill 7 years ago had been an important event. Ranchers from all over the region gathered to buy and sell quality cattle. Jack hadn't planned to buy much, but something drew him to the young black buffalo in the corner of the corral. "This one ain't tame," warned the auctioneer. "Came from far away. They say he belonged to an old man who had a circus or something like that." Perhaps it was the mention of the circus or the penetrating look of the animal, but Jack felt an immediate connection. He offered more than he had planned and took the buffalo home, along with 5 dairy cows. It was coincidence, he muttered to himself now, pushing away these memories. There's no such thing as destiny. When he reached the stable, he found Tim treating a newborn calf. "This one will make a good bull, boss," commented the foreman proudly. "If it survives the winter," replied Jack, always pragmatic. "How are the fences on the north side?" "Almost finished, but there's something you should know. Mr. Joseph has been asking a lot about Smoke. It's not just the money. Seems like he has a special interest in that animal." Jack frowned. What kind of interest? Not sure exactly. But he was talking with a strange man in town, a stranger who said he worked in a circus up north. They mentioned the black buffalo from Hope Ranch. A shiver ran down Jack's spine. Circus up north. The same story from the auction. Coincidence? Keeple. "Your eyes open, Tim. I don't want strangers prowling around the property." As he walked away, Jack couldn't help but look to the corner where Smoke usually stayed. The buffalo wasn't there. For the first time in years, he had left his usual post. "Where's Smoke?" he asked, a slight tone of concern in his voice. Tim pointed to the open field. "He's out there, boss, near the main house. Never seen him so." "Close before." Jack followed the foreman's gaze and saw the imposing silhouette of the black buffalo standing a few yards from the porch, where Mary had taken Luke to get some sun. The animal remained motionless, observing mother and son like a silent sentinel. In that moment, something inside Jack stirred, an inexplicable certainty that Smoke wasn't there by chance, and that the secrets of the past would soon come to light, forever changing the destiny of Hope Ranch. The annual fair in St. John's Lookout always attracted people from all over the region. Colorful stalls occupied the central square, the smell of traditional food hung in the air, and lively music created a festive atmosphere that contrasted with the quiet routine of the small town. Mary Grace had insisted they go. "It'll be good for Luke to meet different people," she argued when Jack initially refused the invitation. Deep down, she also needed this break from the constant tension at the ranch. Reluctantly, Jack agreed. Now he walked uncomfortably among the crowd, watching Mary push the stroller where Luke looked in wonder at the lights and colors around him. "Mr. Miller, what a surprise to see you here." Father Anthony's familiar voice sounded behind him. "Father," he greeted with a nod. "Mary wanted to come." The religious man smiled, adjusting his glasses on his nose. "You did well. A little social interaction never hurt anyone. And how is little Luke?" "Growing," replied Jack, laconic as always. "And the ranch? I heard Joseph Mendoza is interested in buying part of your land." Jack frowned. News traveled fast in the region. "I'm not selling anything." Of course, the priest hurried. "I only mentioned it because he seemed quite interested. He even brought in an outside expert to evaluate the region." "The priest paused. "An interesting man, this expert. Says he worked in circuses all over the country." Jack's heart quickened. Again the mention of the circus, connected to Joseph's interest. "Is this man still in town?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh yes, in fact he's right over there." The priest pointed to a group gathered near Mrs. Teresa's food stall. Among the locals, a figure clearly stood out who didn't belong in that place. A tall, thin man of indefinable age, wearing a light suit despite the heat. There was something strange about his posture, an air of mystery that immediately captured Jack's attention. "Excuse me, Father," he muttered, already moving toward the group. He approached slowly, observing how the stranger gestured, telling some story that kept everyone around him hypnotized. Jack positioned himself at the periphery of the circle, trying to catch the conversation. And that's how the great Mazzini managed to tame the wildest buffalo that ever existed in Brazilian circuses, the man concluded, with a theatrical flourish of his hands. "A buffalo in a circus, is that possible?" asked Mrs. Teresa, incredulous. "My dear lady, in the world of the circus, everything is possible," replied the man with an enigmatic smile. "That animal wasn't an ordinary buffalo. They said he understood commands like a trained dog, that he could sense dangers before they happened. Old Mazzini called him the Guardian." Jack felt a chill down his spine. The coincidences were accumulating, in a disturbing way. "And what happened to this animal?" someone in the group asked. The stranger's smile faltered for an instant. "Ah, that's part of the tragedy. When old Mazzini departed this world, the circus began to fall apart. The animals were sold, dispersed. The buffalo, well, he simply disappeared. Some say he escaped, others that he was sold at an underground auction." His eyes scanned the crowd and for an instant rested on Jack. "Perhaps he's closer than we imagine." A murmur ran through the group. Jack felt exposed, as if the stranger could see through him, straight to the secrets of Hope Ranch. "Dad?" Mary's voice interrupted his thoughts. She approached with Luke in her arms, the little one now drowsy after the excitement of the fair. "Is everything okay? You look pale." Before he could answer, the stranger approached, elegantly extending his hand. "Eugene Mason, a pleasure to meet you, Mr. "Jack Miller," he replied dryly, shaking the offered hand with more force than necessary. "Owner of Hope Ranch." A flash of recognition illuminated the man's eyes. "Ah, the famous Hope Ranch, I've heard much about it. They say your lands are the most fertile in the region." "People exaggerate," Jack cut him off. "What brings you to St. John's Lookout, Mr. Mason?" "Professional curiosity. I'm an agricultural consultant specializing in land for special cultivation. His gaze shifted to Luke, and something in his expression subtly changed. What an adorable child. Mary instinctively pressed her son against her chest, feeling an inexplicable distrust. Thank you. We're leaving now, aren't we, Dad? Jack nodded, positioning himself between Mary and the stranger. Good evening, Mr. Mason. It was a pleasure, Mr. Miller. I'm sure we'll see each other again soon. On the way back to the ranch, Mary broke the tense silence. Who was that? Man, Dad, you seem disturbed. Jack kept his eyes on the dark road. I didn't like his manner. Stay away from him if you see him again. It has something to do with Smoke, doesn't it? I heard part of the story about the circus buffalo. Jack gripped the steering wheel tightly. They're just stories, Mary, coincidences. But as the pickup truck advanced along the dirt road, under the starry Tennessee sky, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was approaching. Something that connected the mysterious Eugene Mason, the Buffalo Smoke, and somehow inexplicably little Luke. When they arrived at the ranch, they noticed something unusual. Smoke was standing near the main gate as if waiting for them. His eyes shone under the moonlight, fixed, vigilant. He never stays here at night, muttered Jack, turning off the engine. Maybe he was worried, suggested Mary, with an attempt at humor that failed to disguise her own discomfort. As they walked to the house, Jack couldn't help but notice how the buffalo's eyes followed every movement of Luke, asleep in Mary's arms, like a silent guardian, protecting something precious, exactly as in the stranger's stories. The rain fell mercilessly on Hope Ranch that Monday morning. Jack watched from the foggy living room window, the muddy fields and the sky heavy with dark clouds. The storm had begun during the night and showed no signs of stopping any time soon. Coffee, Dad? Mary Grace entered the room carrying a tray with 2 steaming cups. Thanks, he murmured, accepting the hot beverage. How's Luke? Still sleeping. The rain calms him. Mary sat next to her father, observing him carefully. Since the encounter with the strange Eugene Mason at the fair 3 days ago, Jack had seemed more taciturn than normal, lost in thoughts. The silence between them was broken by the sound of a vehicle approaching. Jack rose quickly and returned to the window, frowning as he recognized the luxury SUV that was parking in the muddy yard. It's Joseph, he said, his voice laden with distrust. And he's not alone. Mary joined her father at the window. In the rain, Joseph Mendoza was getting out of the vehicle, holding an umbrella. From the passenger side emerged the elegant figure of Eugene Mason, adjusting his impeccable suit as if he were at a social event and not at a ranch during a downpour. What does that man want here? Questioned Mary, feeling tension emanate from her father. We'll find out, replied Jack, heading to the door. Minutes later, the 4 were gathered in the living room. Joseph, a robust middle-aged man with a well-trimmed mustache, seemed uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one leg to the other. Eugene, meanwhile, maintained a serene smile, his eyes taking in every detail of the house as if cataloguing information. I apologize for the visit without notice, Jack, began Joseph. But the matter is urgent, and with this storm— Get to the point, cut in Jack, remaining standing while the visitors were seated. Joseph exchanged a quick look with Eugene before continuing. It's about the proposal I made to buy part of your land. I'm willing to increase the offer, significantly. I already said I'm not selling. Before you refuse, hear the numbers, insisted Joseph, taking an envelope from the inside pocket of his coat. It's double the market value. Jack took the envelope without opening it, his gaze suspicious. Why so much interest in my land specifically? There are several properties for sale in the region. It was Eugene who answered, his voice smooth as velvet. If I may, Mr. Miller, the interest is not just in the land, but in the unique potential it possesses. What kind of potential would that be? Asked Mary, who had remained silent until then. Recent studies indicate that the soil in this region has an ideal composition for certain revolutionary agricultural experiments, explained Eugene, gesturing elegantly. Mr. Mendoza represents investors interested in developing new cultivation techniques. Jack felt the weight of the lie in the man's words, and I suppose these experiments require precisely the part of the ranch where the main corral is located? A tense silence followed the question. Eugene and Joseph exchanged glances again. Actually, Eugene finally responded, we are particularly interested in acquiring also a specific item from your herd. Smoke, concluded Jack, his suspicion confirmed. Eugene's smile faltered for a moment. I see you're a perceptive man, Mr. Miller. Yes, the black buffalo add 50% more to the proposed value, exclusively for that animal. Mary gasped, surprised at the astronomical value they were offering for a single animal. Why so much? Interest in a buffalo? She asked, her distrust now as evident as her father's. Eugene turned to her, his eyes acquiring an almost feverish gleam. My dear lady, that is no ordinary animal. He belonged to the great Mazzini Circus, where he was the main attraction, a buffalo with singular abilities. Abilities, repeated Mary, incredulous. Extraordinary intuition, ability to predict dangers, protect specific people. Eugene looked directly at Jack. I believe you have already witnessed something of the sort, haven't you? Images of a hawk attacking Luke and the buffalo intervening flashed in Jack's mind. How could this man know? I don't know what you're talking about, he replied dryly, and I'm not interested in selling, neither the land nor the animal. Joseph sighed, clearly frustrated. Jack, be reasonable. It's a fortune we're offering. You could buy a larger, more modern property, give a better life to your daughter and grandson. My answer is still no. Eugene rose slowly, adjusting the sleeves of his suit. I understand your reluctance, Mr. Miller. Family ties to the land are powerful. His eyes slid to an old photograph on the wall, showing a younger Jack next to a beautiful woman. Your wife, I presume. A charming woman. Don't mention my mother, intervened Mary, her voice trembling slightly with contained emotion. Forgive me, I didn't mean to offend. Eugene turned to Jack. Just consider our proposal. The world is changing rapidly. Traditions are important, but adaptation is essential for survival. He took a card from his pocket and placed it on the table. I'll be in the region for another week. If you change your mind, get in touch. When the visitors finally departed, Mary and Jack remained, silent, watching through the window as the SUV disappeared under the curtain of rain. What's really going on, Dad? Asked Mary finally. Who is this man and what does he want with Smoke? Jack squeezed the crumpled envelope in his hand. I'm not sure exactly, but I'm certain it's nothing good. At that moment, an infant's cry echoed through the house. Luke had woken up. I'll see what he wants, said Mary, heading to the bedroom. Jack remained in the living room, his mind agitated with unanswered questions. He approached the window again and his gaze met the imposing figure of Smoke, standing in the rain, completely motionless, his gaze fixed on the house as if mounting guard. Even with the downpour, the buffalo had not sought shelter, maintaining his silent vigil. What do you know that I don't, partner? Murmured Jack, feeling that secrets buried for years were about to emerge, bringing with them storms much more dangerous than the one falling on Hope Ranch. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. Night fell over Hope Ranch, bringing with it an unsettling silence. The rain had ceased, leaving behind a humid, heavy air that seemed to amplify every nocturnal sound. Jack couldn't sleep. Sitting on the porch with only the weak light of a kerosene lamp, he was rereading old letters kept in a carved wooden box that had belonged to his late wife, April. I thought you'd be sleeping, said Mary, appearing at the door with a cup of tea in her hands. I brought chamomile. Helps calm the nerves. Jack accepted the drink with a nod of thanks. Luke? Sleeping like an angel, she replied, sitting in the rocking chair next to her father. Her eyes fell on the scattered letters. Mom's letters? Yes, admitted Jack, running his calloused fingers over April's delicate handwriting. I'm looking for answers. Mary observed her father with curiosity. It was rare to see him so vulnerable, connected to the past. Answers about what? Jack hesitated, as if pondering how much he should reveal. Finally, he picked up one of the letters and handed it to Mary. Read this. It's from 2 years before she passed, when we travelled north. Mary adjusted the lamp and began to read, in a low voice. Dear Sister Connie, I'm still amazed by what we witnessed yesterday at the circus. The black buffalo was exactly as you described in the dreams you had, majestic, with eyes that seemed to see beyond the visible. Mazzini himself confirmed that the animal has a special gift, that it can sense dangers before they happen. Jack laughed at me when I mentioned this, always so skeptical, but I see in his eyes that he was impressed too. Perhaps it's the sign we've been waiting for. After so many failed attempts to have another child, I'm beginning to believe that perhaps our destiny is something else. The letter continued, but Mary stopped reading, looking at her father with surprise. You knew Mazzini, the circus owner? Yes, confirmed Jack, his voice heavy with contained emotion. It was during the last trip we took together to visit your uncle in Montana. There was a circus in town. Your mother insisted we go after Mrs. Connie told her about a strange dream she had. And the buffalo. Mary began to connect the dots. Smoke? Jack nodded slowly. He wasn't called that at the time. Mazzini called him Oracle, a pompous name for a circus animal. He paused, taking a sip of the tea. Your mother became obsessed with that animal, said he had a purpose in our lives. And you didn't believe her, concluded Mary, not as an accusation, but as a statement. I was, younger, more stubborn. Jack gave a sad smile. I thought all these things were foolishness, superstitions, but April, she always had a special sensitivity for the inexplicable. What happened afterward? We returned to the ranch. Life continued. 2 years later, your mother faced that terrible illness. His voice broke slightly. Before she passed, she made me promise I would find the buffalo, said he would be important for the future of our family, though she couldn't explain how. Mary looked at her father with new eyes, finally understanding the depth of his connection with Smoke. So when you saw him at that auction, years later? I recognized him immediately, confirmed Jack. Even in that noisy, confusing environment, he maintained that same dignity, that penetrating gaze. It was as if he had been waiting for me. And you bought him to fulfill the promise you made to Mom, concluded Mary, her voice soft with understanding. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Jack laughed without humor. A stubborn old man following his wife's last wish, buying a circus buffalo? Mary covered her father's hand with hers. It's not crazy, it's love, Dad. They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of crickets and the occasional distant mooing of cattle filling the night. And now this man, Eugene, shows up wanting Smoke, continued Mary. Do you think he has some connection to Mazzini's circus? I'm almost certain. The way he talks, the details he knows. Jack frowned. But there's something more, something he's not saying. Why so much interest in an old animal? What does he really want? Before Mary could respond, a sharp cry cut through the silence of the night. Luke had awakened. I'll see what he wants, she said, rising quickly. Jack remained on the porch, carefully putting the letters back in the wooden box. His eyes wandered over the darkness of the fields, stopping at the silhouette of the corral where Smoke should be. To his surprise, the buffalo wasn't in his usual place. Alarmed, Jack picked up the lamp and descended the porch steps. The full moon provided enough light to see the muddy terrain. He headed toward the corral, his heart racing without apparent reason. Dad? Mary's urgent voice made him turn. She was at the door of the house, Luke crying in her arms. Come quick, there's someone prowling around the house. At the same moment, Jack heard a noise to his right, a branch breaking under heavy footsteps. He raised the lamp, the light revealing a hooded figure moving quickly among the trees that surrounded the property. Mary, get inside and lock the doors, he shouted, running back to the house. Before he could reach the porch steps, a deafening sound tore through the night, a gunshot. The noise made Luke cry even louder, and Mary instinctively crouched down, protecting her son. Dad, be careful, she screamed. Jack turned in the direction of the sound and saw 2 figures running across the field. A third person, taller, remained, standing near the fence, a shining object in his hand, possibly a weapon. Suddenly, a deep and powerful roar echoed through the ranch. From the darkness emerged Smoke, his imposing figure advancing at high speed toward the intruders. The black buffalo seemed larger under the moonlight, his eyes reflecting the light like supernatural mirrors. The figures stopped, momentarily frozen by the sight of the furious animal running in their direction. A second shot was fired, but smoke didn't slow down. The intruders finally gave in to panic and ran toward a vehicle parked further down the road. Jack took advantage of the distraction to reach the porch, pushing Mary and Luke inside the house and locking the door behind them. "Who are they?" asked Mary, trembling, hugging Luke tightly. "I'm not sure," replied Jack, looking through the window. "But I have an idea who sent them." Outside, Smoke had stopped at the property line like a vigilant guardian, his eyes fixed on the road where the intruders had fled. The revelation Jack had so feared was finally materializing. The buffalo really did have a special purpose at Hope Ranch, to protect his family at any cost. The St. John's Lookout Sheriff's Office was a simple brick building with only 2 rooms and a rarely occupied cell. Sheriff Severino, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a thick mustache, listened attentively to Jack's account of the night attack on Hope Ranch. "And you're sure you didn't recognize any of the intruders?" asked Severino, noting the details in a worn notebook. "It was dark. I only saw silhouettes," replied Jack, the deep circles under his eyes revealing a poorly slept night. "But I believe they have a connection to Eugene Mason and Joseph Mendoza." The sheriff raised his eyebrows. "Those are serious accusations, Jack. Joseph is a respected man in the region." "Respected doesn't mean honest," retorted Jack, irritated by the sheriff's hesitation. "They offered a lot. $5 money for my land and for the buffalo. When I refused, this happens. Too much of a coincidence." Severino sighed, closing the notebook. "I'll investigate, but without concrete evidence, I can't do much. I suggest you reinforce the ranch's security for now." Jack left the sheriff's office even more frustrated than when he had entered. The small town was already in full activity that sunny morning, a contrast to the tension he carried. He decided to stop by the pharmacy to buy some medicine for Luke, who had woken up with a fever after the fright of the previous night. As he turned the corner, he stopped abruptly. Across the street, comfortably seated on a park bench, was Eugene Mason. The man was reading a newspaper with apparent tranquility, as if nothing had happened. Noticing Jack's presence, he raised his eyes and smiled, waving as if they were old friends. Without thinking twice, Jack crossed the street with large strides, stopping in front of the man with clenched fists. "We need to talk," he said through gritted teeth. Eugene calmly folded the newspaper. "Of course, Mr. Miller, please sit down." "I prefer to stand. What happened last night?" "Pardon?" Eugene arched his eyebrows in feigned surprise. "Did something happen on your property?" "Don't play dumb," growled Jack. "We had intruders. Shots were fired. My daughter and grandson could have been hurt." Eugene maintained a neutral expression, but his eyes gleamed with interest. "I'm sorry for what occurred, but I must clarify that I have nothing to do with it. And I imagine no one was hurt thanks to the guardian of the ranch." The veiled mention of Smoke made Jack's blood boil. "What do you really want with my buffalo? And don't come at me with stories about agricultural experiments." For a moment, Eugene seemed to consider his options. Finally, he indicated the empty space beside him on the bench. "Sit down, Mr. Miller. This is a long story and better told without curious ears listening." Reluctantly, Jack sat down, maintaining distance from the man. "You met the great Mazzini, didn't you?" began Eugene, his voice now lower and more serious. "And your wife, April, was especially fascinated by the black buffalo." The mention of his wife caught Jack by surprise. "How do you know that?" "Because Lorenzo Mazzini was my father," revealed Eugene, his eyes fixed on Jack's. "And that buffalo is more than just a circus animal." A heavy silence settled between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the town and the occasional chirping of birds in the square. "My father came from a long lineage of Italian circus artists," continued Eugene. "But he wasn't just an ordinary animal trainer. He had a special gift with animals, a connection that few understood. The buffalo you call Smoke was his masterpiece." "What do you mean by that?" "My father believed that certain animals possess an extraordinary sensitivity, a consciousness that transcends basic instinct. He dedicated years to training that buffalo, not to do silly tricks, but to develop its natural, intuitive capabilities. Eugene paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. Oracle, as he was called, could sense imminent dangers, protect specific people. It was like a spiritual guardian. "That's absurd," muttered Jack, although images of smoke protecting Luke from the hawk and driving away the intruders the previous night flooded his mind. "Is it really?" Eugene smiled softly. "Then why have you kept him all these years? Why do you refuse a small fortune for him? Deep down you know there's something special about that animal." Jack looked away, unable to deny the truth in the man's words. "When my father fell ill," continued Eugene, "he had a vision. He said Oracle had a greater purpose, that he should protect a special child. He made me promise to find the buffalo after he passed." His voice broke slightly. "Unfortunately, when I finally tracked the animal to the auction, you had already bought him. And now you want to take him away," concluded Jack, his distrust returning. "I want to fulfill the promise I made to my father," corrected Eugene. "But after observing your ranch in recent days, I'm beginning to think that perhaps the buffalo is already where he should be." His eyes met Jack's. "Your grandson, Luke, there's something special about him, isn't there?" The mention of his grandson made Jack stiffen. "Stay away from my grandson." "I don't intend to harm anyone," assured Eugene. "On the contrary, I believe our families are connected in some way. My father and your wife seem to share an understanding that we are still trying to reach." "And the intruders from last night?" questioned Jack, still suspicious. Eugene's expression darkened. "I fear they may be related to Joseph Mendoza. He originally sought me out as a land specialist, but when I casually mentioned my interest in rare buffaloes, he became strangely interested. Said he knew a rancher who owned a unique specimen. Why would Joseph have interest in smoke?" "That," replied Eugene slowly, "is what concerns me most. There are rumors about a treasure that my father might have hidden before he passed. Some believe that the buffalo is somehow the key to finding it." Jack laughed without humor. "A treasure? Now your story sounds like a fairy tale." "Perhaps," agreed Eugene with a slight smile. "Or perhaps the real treasure isn't gold or jewels, but something more valuable." Before Jack could respond, his cell phone rang. It was Mary. "Dad?" Her voice sounded urgent. "You need to come back now. It's Luke. The fever has increased, and he's saying strange things, and smoke won't leave the front of the house. He's agitated." Jack's heart quickened. "I'm coming." He hung up and rose quickly. "Problems?" asked Eugene, noticing his concerned expression. "I need to get back to the ranch," replied Jack dryly, already walking away. "Jack," called Eugene, making him stop. "We're not enemies. If what I suspect is correct, we may need each other soon, especially if Joseph is involved with dangerous people." Jack looked at the man for a long moment. "Stay away from my family and my ranch. Whatever is happening, we'll resolve it ourselves." As he walked away with quick steps toward his pickup, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that somehow his family's destiny was irreversibly intertwined with the mysterious legacy of Lorenzo Mazzini and his guardian buffalo. When Jack arrived at the ranch, he found Mary on the porch with Luke in her arms. The boy's face was reddened with fever, his small eyes half closed as he mumbled unintelligible words. Upon seeing his grandfather, he stretched his tiny arms in his direction. "How is he?" asked Jack, taking his grandson in his arms. "The fever won't break," replied Mary, concern evident in her voice. "I gave him the medicine Dr. Anderson prescribed, but it doesn't seem to be working." Jack felt the child's warm body against his chest. "And what are these strange things he's saying?" Mary hesitated, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "They're words, Dad. Words that a 10-month-old baby shouldn't know. And the strangest thing," she lowered her voice, "some of them seem to be in Italian." A chill ran down Jack's spine. His conversation with Eugene echoed in his mind. Lorenzo Mazzini, the Italian animal trainer, his special gift, the connection with the buffalo. "Where's Smoke?" he asked, suddenly alert. "There," Mary pointed to the open field in front of the house. "He hasn't moved from that spot since dawn. It's like he's standing guard." The black buffalo remained motionless about 50 yards from the house, his eyes fixed in the direction where Luke was. Upon noticing Jack's presence with the boy in his arms, the animal took a few steps forward, as if responding to a silent call. "Dad, what's happening?" asked Mary, frightened by the intensity of the moment. First the intruders, now Luke sick and speaking strange things, and Smoke acting this way. Jack took a deep breath. "I'll tell you what I discovered in town, but first, we need to bring this fever down." In the next few minutes, they bathed Luke in lukewarm water, trying to alleviate his discomfort. The boy alternated between periods of restlessness and moments when he fixed his gaze on some invisible point, whispering words that sounded foreign to the family's ears. When they finally managed to get the little one to sleep, Jack took Mary to the kitchen and told her about his encounter with Eugene Mason. "So he's the son of the circus owner?" asked Mary, incredulous. "And he believes there's some special connection between Smoke and Luke." "Sounds crazy, I know," admitted Jack, running his hand over his tired face. "But after everything we've seen, the buffalo saving Luke from the hawk, driving away the intruders last night. And now Luke speaking Italian without ever having been exposed to the language," completed Mary, her mind trying to process all the information. "Do you think it could be true, that Smoke has some kind of special gift?" Before Jack could answer, a sharp sound came from the bedroom. Luke had awakened and was crying desperately. They ran there and found the baby sitting in bed, his wide eyes fixed on the window, pointing with his trembling little finger. "Mazzini," babbled the boy between sobs. "Mazzini coming." Mary and Jack exchanged alarmed looks. "How can he know that name?" whispered Mary. "We never talked about this in front of him." Jack approached the window cautiously. Outside, Smoke had changed position. He was now facing the main road, as if expecting someone's arrival. "Someone's coming," muttered Jack, feeling the hair on his neck stand up. At the same moment, they heard the sound of a vehicle approaching. It wasn't the familiar noise of Tim's pickup or any other ranch employee. It was the powerful engine of a luxury car. "Stay with Luke," instructed Jack, quickly heading to the living room where he kept his shotgun. Armed, he positioned himself on the porch, watching the car that was slowly approaching. To his surprise, he recognized Eugene Mason's vehicle. The man was driving alone and stopped at a respectful distance from the house. "I didn't give you permission to come here," shouted Jack, the shotgun visible in his hands. Eugene raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I apologize for the intrusion, but something told me I should come. It's about your grandson, isn't it? He's showing signs." "What are you talking about?" demanded Jack, his distrust fighting against growing curiosity. "May I approach? I promise I'm alone and have no ill intentions." After a moment of hesitation, Jack reluctantly nodded, keeping the gun in position. As Eugene walked toward the house, something extraordinary happened. Smoke, who until then had been observing everything from a distance, began to move. The black buffalo advanced slowly, positioning itself between Eugene and the house, not in a threatening way, but as if assessing the visitor's intentions. "Hello, old friend," said Eugene softly to the animal. "You fulfilled your mission well, haven't you?" To Jack's astonishment, Smoke lowered his head slightly, as if recognizing the man. "He recognizes your scent," explained Eugene, continuing his measured approach. "Not my personal scent, but my father's. I've been using Lorenzo's old handkerchief, a small guarantee for this meeting." At that moment, Mary appeared on the porch with Luke in her arms. Seeing Eugene, the baby stretched his arms in his direction, babbling excitedly. "He feels the connection too," observed Eugene with a sad smile. "Exactly as my father predicted." "What connection?" asked Mary, instinctively protecting her son. "What's happening to him?" Eugene stopped at the foot of the porch steps, maintaining a respectful distance. "For your son, my lady, possesses the same gift my father had, a special sensitivity, a capacity for connection with certain animals. Lorenzo Mazzini believed this gift was rare, appearing only in some people across generations." "How can you be sure?" questioned Jack, still suspicious. "The signs are unmistakable," replied Eugene. "The unexplained fever, the words in a language never learned, the buffalo's agitation. My father went through something similar as a child, according to my grandfather. It's as if my father's spirit were trying to communicate through the boy, to complete something unfinished." "This is madness," muttered Mary, though her tone lacked conviction. "May I?" Eugene extended his arms, indicating he would like to approach Luke. After a confirming look from Jack, Mary hesitantly nodded. Eugene slowly climbed the steps and approached the baby, who was watching him with a disconcerting intensity for such a small child. "Hello, little one," said Eugene softly in English before switching to Italian. "I know you can understand me somehow, can't you?" To everyone's amazement, Luke smiled and responded with a babble that sounded strangely melodic, almost as if trying to imitate the foreign language. "What does my grandson have to do with all this?" asked Jack, finally lowering the shotgun. "Why is Joseph Mendoza so interested in our ranch and the buffalo?" Eugene turned to him, his expression now grave. "That, Mr. Miller, is what we need to discover urgently. Because if my suspicions are correct, it was no coincidence that your wife April felt drawn to my father's buffalo years ago, nor was it coincidence that you found him at that auction." He looked at Luke with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Everything was predestined for this moment, for this child, and I fear that Joseph has somehow discovered this." At that instant, Smoke emitted a deep bellow, the first sound any of them had heard him make in years. All turned their gaze to the buffalo, who was now staring fixedly at the road beyond the ranch boundaries. "He senses something approaching," murmured Eugene, suddenly alert. "Something dangerous." The sun was beginning to set on the Tennessee horizon, casting long shadows over Hope Ranch as the family prepared to face whatever was coming and to discover, finally, the true purpose of the extraordinary connection between an old circus buffalo and a 10-month-old baby. Twilight was tinting the sky with orange and purple hues when the headlights of 3 vehicles appeared on the road leading to Hope Ranch. Jack, Mary, Eugene, and little Luke watched from the porch, while Smoke remained motionless in the field, like a black sentinel against the flaming horizon. "It's Joseph," muttered Jack, recognizing the luxury pickup that led the convoy. "And he's not alone." "We should call the police," suggested Mary, pressing Luke against her chest. "Sheriff Severino wouldn't get here in time," replied Jack. "Besides, Joseph has a lot of influence in the region. We need to resolve this ourselves." Eugene stepped forward. "Let me speak with them first. Joseph still thinks we're on the same side." "I don't trust you," said Jack frankly. "At this moment, Mr. Miller, I'm your best chance," replied Eugene. "My father dedicated his life to protecting the legacy that Smoke represents. I won't allow Joseph to corrupt it through greed." The vehicles stopped in the ranch yard. From the main pickup descended Joseph Mendoza, accompanied by 2 intimidating men. From the other cars emerged 4 more men, all with the vigilant posture of those accustomed to dangerous situations. "Stay here with Luke," Jack instructed Mary. "And if things get worse, run to the back and take the trail that leads to Mrs. Connie's house." Mary nodded, her eyes full of fear and determination. Luke, strangely, seemed calmer now, his eyes fixed in Smoke's direction. Eugene and Jack descended the porch steps, positioning themselves side by side in the yard. The shotgun was in Jack's steady hands, but he knew they were at a great numerical disadvantage. "Good evening, gentlemen," greeted Joseph with false cordiality. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "What do you want, Joseph?" asked Jack directly. "The same thing I've wanted from the beginning, Jack. Your land and that special buffalo." He pointed to Smoke, who remained motionless, observing the scene. "Although now I better understand his value thanks to our friend Eugene here." Joseph turned his gaze to Eugene, a cold smile on his face. "You really thought I wouldn't investigate your past, Mason? Or should I say, Mazzini?" "You did your homework," replied Eugene, maintaining his composure. "Then you must know you're dealing with something beyond your understanding." "What I know," retorted Joseph, "is that this buffalo is the key to a treasure your father hid before he died. A treasure I now want for myself." There is no material treasure, said Eugene, taking a step forward. My father's legacy is spiritual, a rare connection that— Spare me the mystical stories, interrupted Joseph. The circus company records clearly show that Lorenzo Mazzini sold a fortune in jewels and gold before his death. Money that was never found. He smiled, satisfied. Some say he hid it all in a secret location, and that only his special buffalo knows the way. That's ridiculous, exclaimed Jack, though doubt began to grow in his mind. Could it be possible? Ridiculous. Or not, continued Joseph, gesturing for his men to spread out across the yard. I'm going to find out today. I have already wasted too much time with offers and negotiations. Now I'll take what I want by force. One of the men advanced toward the house, where Mary was watching everything from the porch, Luke in her arms. Jack raised the shotgun, pointing. It at the intruder. One more step and I'll shoot, he threatened, his voice loaded with determination. Joseph's other men drew their own weapons, creating a tense standoff. Eugene positioned himself next to Jack, keeping his hands visible. Think carefully, Joseph, warned Eugene. Even if you get the buffalo, he will never reveal anything to you. Lorenzo's legacy can only be accessed by someone with the gift. Gift? Joseph laughed. You mean what's happening with the child? Seeing the surprise on Eugene and Jack's faces, he continued, I have my informants. I know about the fever, the Italian words. Perhaps I need the boy too, then. At that moment, something changed in the atmosphere of the ranch. Smoke, who until then had remained distant, began to move. The black buffalo advanced in slow, deliberate steps toward the group, his hooves heavily marking the ground. The animal is approaching, alerted one of Joseph's men, nervous. Shoot it if it gets too close, ordered Joseph. As the tension escalated, Luke began to stir in Mary's arms. The boy stretched his arms toward Smoke, babbling excitedly. Suddenly he pronounced with surprising clarity, Speranza! Hope, translated Eugene, his eyes widening with sudden understanding. Of course, it's no coincidence that your ranch is called Hope, Mr. Miller. Before anyone could react, Smoke accelerated his pace, not toward Joseph or his men, but toward a small hill near the house, where a solitary old olive tree rose against the night sky. The treasure, exclaimed Joseph, his greed overcoming. Caution. Follow the buffalo. Chaos ensued. While Joseph and his men ran after Smoke, Jack took advantage of the confusion to retreat toward the porch, protecting Mary and Luke. What's happening? Asked Mary, confused by the sudden movement. I'm not sure exactly, replied Jack, but I think we're about to discover Smoke's true purpose in our lives. Eugene joined them, his eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. My father always said that Speranza was the most important word of all. Hope is the greatest treasure, he would repeat. Together they watched as Smoke stopped under the olive tree. The buffalo began to dig at the soil with his hooves, in behavior never seen before. Joseph and his men approached, expectant. It must be buried here, shouted one of them, already wielding a shovel he had found nearby. As the men began to dig frantically, something extraordinary happened. Luke stretched his arms once more in Smoke's direction and exclaimed with perfect clarity, Aqua! Aqua! Water! Translated Mary, confused. At the same moment, a deep sound emerged from the soil where they were digging. What began as a soft bubbling soon transformed into a powerful gush, as a hidden spring beneath layers of earth finally found passage to the surface. The crystalline water gushed forth forcefully, soaking Joseph and his men, who retreated surprised and frustrated. A spring, exclaimed Jack, astonished, in the middle of the dry season. The real treasure, murmured Eugene, a smile of understanding illuminating his face. Pure water in a region that has always suffered from droughts. My father didn't hide gold or jewels. He found something much more valuable. Joseph, soaked and furious, turned to them. Is this some kind of joke? Where's the gold? There is. No gold, Joseph, replied Eugene calmly. Only water, the most precious of riches for a rancher. This makes no sense, vociferated Joseph. The records clearly show that Lorenzo Mazzini converted a fortune before dying. And invested it all in hydrological research, completed Eugene. My father grew up in rural Italy. He knew the value of good water. In the last years of his life, he dedicated himself to finding hidden springs throughout the country. This must be the last one he discovered, but didn't have time to reveal before he passed. The water continued to gush, forming a small stream that ran down the slope toward the dry fields of the ranch. Smoke remained beside the spring, imposing as if he had finally fulfilled his mission. Defeated, Joseph made a gesture to his Fnassi, let's get out of here. What about the buffalo? Asked one of them. Leave the damn animal alone, replied Joseph bitterly. It's worth nothing to me now. As the invaders returned to their vehicles, Jack, Mary, Luke, and Eugene approached the newly discovered spring. The water sparkled under the moonlight, promising new life for the ranch that had struggled against scarcity for so long. How did the buffalo know? Asked Mary, observing Smoke with new respect. Some animals can sense the presence of underground water, explained Eugene. My father enhanced this natural ability in Oracle, or Smoke as you call him. He was just waiting for the right moment and the right person to reveal his secret. Luke stretched out his arms toward Smoke, who approached gently, allowing the little one to touch his moist muzzle. The boy's fever had completely disappeared, and his eyes shone with childish joy. The connection between them, murmured Jack, amazed. Your wife knew, didn't she? April sensed this years ago. Eugene nodded. Some people are naturally more sensitive to these connections. Your wife was one of them, and now your grandson seems to have inherited this special sensitivity. Mary approached Jack, placing a hand on his shoulder. That's why Mom wanted so badly for you to find the buffalo. She knew that one day he would be important to us, to the ranch. For Luke's future, completed Jack, finally understanding. She always saw further than all of us. In the days that followed, news of the miraculous spring at Hope Ranch spread throughout the region. Many came to see the phenomenon with their own eyes, the crystalline water that gushed from the earth in the middle of the dry season, the black buffalo that remained as a silent guardian of the place, and little Luke who, inexplicably, seemed to understand the animal like no one else. Joseph Mendoza, humiliated by the episode, moved far away, selling his lands for a fraction of their value. Sheriff Severino, after witnessing the events, began to treat Mrs. Connie's stories with new respect, recognizing that not everything in the world could be explained by common logic. As for Eugene, he didn't leave immediately as everyone expected. Still have much to learn about my father's legacy, he explained to Jack, as they watched the new fence being erected around the spring. And your grandson will need guidance to understand his special gift as he grows. Are you suggesting staying around here? Asked Jack, surprising himself by not immediately opposing the idea. If you'll allow me, replied Eugene with a smile. After all, Hope Ranch will now need someone with knowledge in irrigation to make the most of this liquid treasure. Mary, who had approached silently carrying Luke, smiled upon hearing the conversation. I think it would be good for everyone, especially for Luke to have someone who understands what he's experiencing. Jack looked at his grandson, who was babbling happily in his mother's arms, then at Smoke grazing peacefully near the spring, and finally at the ranch fields which, for the first time in years, promised true abundance. April. I used to say that nothing happens by chance, he said, extending his hand to Eugene. That each encounter, each event, has a greater purpose that we don't always understand immediately. So Eugene shook the offered hand with firmness and respect. Wise words, my father would say the same. On the horizon, the sun was beginning to set, bathing Hope Ranch in golden light. The water from the spring reflected the rays in thousands of brilliant facets, as if they were truly the treasure that Joseph had so coveted. Luke, in Mary's arms, pointed to Smoke and smiled. The buffalo raised his head as if responding to the child's silent call. In that perfect moment, the circle seemed complete. The past finally reconciled with the present, paving the way for a future of renewal and hope. Speranza, murmured Jack, savoring the foreign word that he now fully understood. The ranch had been correctly named after all, not just a name, but a prophecy, and a promise that had finally been fulfilled.